see the UAE has changed completely in the last 25, 30 years. It's become one of the most popular places in the world to come and live, and there's always a push for the UAE to be the best environment. We want to be the best at everything. We want to give the best standard of living.
Hi everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Sustainability Heroes, a podcast brought to you by Tadweer Group, where we will speak to guests from across the sustainability sector. I'm your host, Sara Mousa, and I'm delighted to be joined by our lovely Mark Siddorn. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Nice to have you here. So Mark is the Strategic Planning and Business Performance Director, and he has a lot of interesting insights to share with us on the show today.
Thank you very much. Yes.
So Mark, please tell me a bit more about your day-to-day role at Tadweer Group.
Well, as my title states, basically, we look at two areas. We're looking at the strategic planning for the business for the long-term future, aligned with our vision of 2030 for the 80% diversion for landfill, but also looking at the future of the business in the sense of our not only Abu Dhabi-wide expansion, but also UAE-wide expansion, and also into the GCC, North Africa, and where we're going to move internationally. Alongside that, of course, I'm also responsible for business performance, which means really looking at our internal processes and policies and our people in general to see where we can improve. Obviously, as a growing business, that is quite a challenge because we have new people joining all the time, some restructuring going on with subsidiaries being formalized as well. So, it's a very interesting role.
There's a lot to unpack there. Now, I love that you talked a little bit about kind of the waste sector, specifically in the UAE, and how we are trying to achieve our ambitions of diverting 80% of waste from landfill by 2030. So what are the kind of key ways that we're doing that?
Well, first and foremost, we're trying to assess, obviously, what waste we're handling at the moment, what we deal with as a company on a day-to-day basis. So teams spend a lot of time and effort really delving into the areas where we receive waste, where we manage waste at the moment. Obviously, I think that people know we only actually recycle and recover about 38% of our waste today. So to jump from 38 up to 80% is quite a big jump in the next 5 or 6 years. But the first and foremost thing is to really look at, as I say, what type of waste are we collecting so we know what to do with it.
I love that.
So going on from that, obviously we look at our waste in the sense of as a resource, as you know. So looking at municipal solid waste, looking at construction demolition, which are two of the major volumes that we deal with. Really, what's the best way to handle it? We always phrase it as being what is the most economic and the most environmentally friendly solution.
Course, yeah.
And I think that both of those go hand in hand. If you look at it from the point of view of our shareholders and also our legislators, which is EAD, they both want to ensure that we achieve the best out of the resources we're recovering. As I say, from EAD's point of view, it is really related to the environment. And of course, we have to always protect the environment, do the best for the environment. But of course, it has to be financially sustainable as well.
I appreciate that. Let's touch a little bit more on kind of the environment element of this. So obviously, one of our key mandates at Tadweer is to engage with the community and ensure that we're kind of educating people on recycling. So how exactly do you come into that, and why is this important?
Well, particularly when it comes to municipal solid waste or household waste, which is, I say, a huge percentage of the waste that we collect. In order to, I say, generate the value and to protect the environment, the best way to handle this is segregation at source. So we're trying to develop methodologies and really look at people's behavior to see how we can really build that into people's day-to-day lives. So I always say that, it's something that has to become second nature. It isn't at the moment in the UAE, and I think there's a number of reasons why that hasn't happened. Really, it's because of, in the past, there hasn't been any real consistency. A lot of different ideas, different approaches, different companies, and to me, we need to be consistent in our approach. So when we look at segregation at source in the sense of households, we need to make it easy for people. People are very busy in the UAE, as they are in many other countries. People don't really have time to go and take their waste to be recycled in places. It's quite difficult. So, put bins in locations where they go every day. Where if you go to your car park, there'll be a recycling bin there. If you go to your waste room, there'll be a recycling bin. And also make it clear what can be recycled, what can't be recycled. People get confused, If it's a glass bottle, where do I put it? If it's an aluminium can, where does it go? But keep that consistency. So And also to see a big uptick in the sense of the amount of recycling. We're also looking at starting with some of the closed communities, you can call it, in the sense of the new developments in Abu Dhabi, maybe with Aldar or other developers, where we can actually offer benefits to them. So, for example, maybe you have a community league table, different towers, compete with each other about their recycling. And then you can give something back to the community. So maybe you give them a benefit in the sense of, I don't know, refurbishing their children's park or something, or an incentive to them. So there's something, not financial incentive as such, but an incentive to improve their community. So it's a kind of a win-win situation then for everybody. The reason we want to do that as well is, of course, when we recover dry recyclables, we're able then to get a much better value out of it. It's easier for us to manage, but you need that behavioral change. And the same thing comes from green waste. When you look at green waste, of course, that's the worst effect on the environment, you can say, in the sense of going to landfill. We don't want to produce methane. We don't want to produce greenhouse gases. So if we can handle that material as close as possible to where it's being produced and produce compost from it, that could go back into the environment. So there's lots of benefits to the community based on this. And then we recover better quality material. And of course, then it also automatically increases our recycling rates.
I love that. So there's definitely a few interesting points you've made there. So we've talked a lot about kind of unlocking the value of waste and the economic opportunities with waste. How, from a business perspective, what is something that you feel the audiences should know about the economic value of our waste and our recovered recyclables?
Well, I think that people tend to think that it's an easy thing to do, to manage people's waste. It's not. It's very difficult. We have to build a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of planning is going into that at the moment, where the development of our material recovery facilities for household waste and also commercial industrial waste, the expansion and improvement of our construction and demolition facilities, and then obviously the design and build of the waste to energy plant, which will be up and running by the end of 2027. So there's a lot of thought and process goes into that, looking at the value chain, looking at the waste, how we manage it through the whole process to the end, to obviously reduce the amount of waste going to landfill. Obviously, we still need landfills, hopefully as small as possible, and they're not a benefit to anybody. But if you have a proper engineered landfill, which is properly lined and has gas capture and then leachate capture, you're controlling the waste that goes into it. So what we want to do is obviously eliminate as much waste as possible before it gets to landfill, but when it does get to landfill, manage it as best as possible as well.
Perfect. And obviously you've been in the waste sector in the UAE for over 15 years?
25 years.
25 years. That's amazing. So obviously having essentially seen the growth of the recycling and the waste infrastructure in the country, and having been with Tadweer for this journey as well, why is it important now for us to introduce accelerated technology and world-class facilities such as our MRF, such as our construction demolition plant now? Why are we at this vital stage in the waste sector?
Well, as you see, the UAE has changed completely in the last 25, 30 years. I mean, when I first came here, I think there were 30,000 Brits in the country. Now I think there's more than 350,000 Brits in the country. It's become one of the most popular places in the world to come and live. And there's always a push for the UAE to be the best environment. We want to be the best at everything. We want to give the best standard of living. So to me, this is part of that. Everybody talks about the new restaurants that are opening up and the new places you can go out. But when we do that, we actually produce more waste. So as the population grows, it's getting more and more critical. And as Sheikh Zayed said, we need to protect our environment where we are. So in the past, out of sight, out of mind may have been the case, and a lot of countries were like that before. But the wonderful thing since COP28 particularly is that the UAE has taken this on and really wants to improve very, very quickly to become one of the best countries in the world when it comes to waste management. So it's obviously environmental. There's many reasons behind it, but let's just say that as a country, as we are developing to be like number one in the world in many sectors, planning trips to Mars and other things like that.
I didn't know about that. Can I be on that trip?
I think there is one planned, or to the moon anyway. But certainly we need to be at the forefront of waste management as well. So using the expertise we have in-house, looking at developing new technologies, looking at ways to upcycle our waste, to turn green waste into biochar or produce graphene from methane, for example. These are just new technologies we're working on at the moment that hopefully in the future will be commercialized, where actually we don't just manage the waste, we turn it into something valuable for the environment and for the community around us. So I think it's something that's been missed in the past. I think that before COP28 particularly, waste was really just looked at as a problem, but not as an opportunity. And I think since COP28, it's seen, there is an opportunity here. I used to remember that going to see people and they would tell me they want to sell me their waste, and you put all the infrastructure in. Well, it doesn't really work like that. It's got to be a partnership. So looking at the tariff infrastructure putting in the future and looking at how we're actually developing with the communities is extremely important.
That's really, really cool to understand, and just understanding kind of the different elements, the different factors that come into it, whether it's like the regulations that need to change, whether it's the kind of the tariffs to introduce. And we talked a little bit about partnerships as well. Why are partnerships and working with like-minded organizations essentially so important for us?
Well, I think that we can't do this on our own. We need support from our stakeholders. Not only financial support, of course, but we need legislative support. If you look at EAD, they're an extremely important partner with us, and MOCO as well. Legislation at the moment only applies emirate by emirate, which is a hindrance. You can't transport waste between emirates or even recycled material. It's extremely difficult. In the future, it would be great if we had one federal law for waste which covered the whole of the UAE. So, for example, you would have, say, a glass recycling facility maybe in Sharjah, where you could then take your glass, or it could be crushed here and then taken to a facility in Sharjah, for example. At the moment, that's not really possible. Everybody operates in their own emirates, and every emirate has its own kind of policies and legislation. In larger emirates, it's not so difficult because we have a mass of waste that we can treat and we can make it economically viable. But certainly for the smaller emirates, the other 5 smaller emirates, you say, it's difficult for them because they're not of a scale that they can manage their waste in a cost-effective manner. They can't really apply high gate fees and things like that. Dubai put in place a few years ago now 100 dirham a ton for waste when they built their waste to energy plant. So that was a step in the right direction. Before it was only 1 dirham a ton, now it's 100 times. But they need to do something because that will then promote recycling and promote obviously the payback for waste to energy. So with regards to legislation, it's not just the writing the laws, it's also having the control in place. So we also rely on our stakeholders to ensure that the companies that are operating in the sector are managed properly, that their vehicles are registered properly, that they only transport certain types of waste, that we know where those vehicles are through tracking or whatever it may be, and we know the waste is going from where it should be. That also comes on to the exported materials. A lot of material is exported from this country, kind of legally or illegally, doesn't, the point is it's still exported. So that's an economic value that's lost from this country. So of course, as a UAE, we import most of the materials that we consume on a daily basis. If the residual of those materials is collected and then exported, that's a loss to the country. So again, we want to control those areas. So we need to have these partnerships to make sure that in future we can stop this from happening and we can manage it in the most environmentally effective way possible. We can't have waste, for example, not being tracked. The worst thing to me would be, from a reputational point of view, is any type of hazardous material, maybe batteries or whatever, being exported to a country where then you have maybe even children stripping it apart in a hazardous environment. And, that would show, say it came from the UAE, for example. That would be awful. We know cases where retailers, say in Europe, who are selling clothing, different types of stores. I think H&M was just talked about recently, where they export clothing to Ghana to be treated, to be managed, but it's not being treated properly. It ends up on the beaches, So this is something extremely important, that how we need to plug these gaps to make sure that all of the material that's generated here is actually managed within the country.
Wow. I am so grateful that you have taken the time to share so many important insights, not just about Tadweer Group, but also about the wider waste sector and even some of the global challenges. It's been very insightful hearing you. And I do have one final question for you, Mark, if I may. Obviously, your passion, speaks for itself, and the dedication, commitment you've had to the sector for years is very evident. And I'm just curious, what is your favorite thing about waste?
It changes every day. It's, I trained as a civil engineer. and it's quite boring, to be honest with you. It doesn't really change. It's just, it's the same. There's no challenge to it. The great thing about waste is you learn something every day. And this is what I tell people I work with, and I try to inspire some of the younger staff in the company. You have an amazing opportunity here. This has never been done before, in the sense of a emirate-wide, or even you could say it's like a small country, to develop a waste sector like this from scratch into something where you can really achieve something. You imagine in 6 years' time we're achieving 80% diversion from landfill of the volumes that we're dealing with today. It's astonishing to think we could achieve that. So that's what inspires me. Is I wake up every day and think, actually, we're doing something good for the environment, all of us, on a day-to-day basis. But I like the challenge. I like the fact that it changes all the time, because waste changes all the time. And that's what other people need to understand. It's not a constant commodity.
Right.
It's always moving, always changing, because people's habits change. We don't see waste changes during Ramadan, from other times of the year.
Very true.
So not just the volume, but also the type. So to me, it's a very challenging environment to work in, but it's also very exciting, because, as I said, you're always learning something new. I think every single day I learn about a new technology, a new idea. Only last week something came up which really excites me. So there are a lot of things, I think, that in the industry that can inspire people to really become leaders in waste management. I think in the past it's always been like, it's
just trash.
Keep it out of sight, out of mind. As I said, it's not something I want to really get involved in. I'd rather be a banker or a lawyer or something like that, something fancy. But I think it's changing. I really do. I get a feel now that there's much more interest in it. I think, as I say, from COP28 that really started to change things. People's perception is different. So people want to get involved in the sector, want to understand the sector, which I think is wonderful. I think when I came here 25 years ago, this would have been a dream to me to do this, and I think that's where now I feel really we can achieve something amazing for not only Abu Dhabi, but for the UAE as a whole.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the very first episode of the podcast, and we'll see you next time.